The transition zone between Egypt and Sudan is defined by a harsh, hyper-arid geography. Outside the immediate banks of the Nile, the landscape offers almost no natural resources to support human habitation. This map shows the linguistic boundaries of historical Nubia. Today, two distinct language families dominate: Afro-Asiatic, like Arabic and Beja, and Nilo-Saharan, primarily the Nubian subgroup. But Nilo-Saharan didn't originate here. Its roots trace far to the west, in Central African regions near Chad. This geographic origin reveals a structural contradiction. While their genetic lineage is Nilo-Saharan, these languages utilize grammatical rules characteristic of the Afro-Asiatic families found hundreds of miles to their east. The primary mismatch is constituent order. Nubian languages utilize a strict subject-object-verb, or SOV, syntax. The Kordofan Nubian language Taglana demonstrates this. An accusative case marker, gi, attaches to the object, forcing the verb to the absolute terminal end of the sentence. This strict SOV structure is an outlier. The broader Nilo-Saharan genetic family does not naturally organize sentences using these specific terminal rules. Entire grammatical architectures are not inherited by mistake. A deep structural overlap like this points to an intense, prehistoric contact event between two distinct populations. To find out how groups separated by a lethal desert managed to exchange syntax, we have to reconstruct an extinct river. Roughly 20,000 years ago, during the terminal Pleistocene, the broader Sahara was locked in a state of extreme hyper-arid desertification. This lack of precipitation made the deep desert uninhabitable. Human survival was strictly confined to active riverine systems and high elevation zones. This vertically shaded region maps an ancient linguistic landscape hugging the White Nile. Locked together, these communities developed a shared syntax, Verb-Initial constituent order. This pervasive rule even dictated the structure of early Semitic and ancient Egyptian at the northernmost reaches. This shared grammar acts as a geographic footprint. It indicates the existence of localized trading networks spanning thousands of years, entirely isolated along the water. This verb-initial baseline highlights the scale of the modern Nubian anomaly. The subject-object-verb structure breaks this ancient established rule entirely. The populations carrying SOV syntax were locked far to the west. The Sahara acted as an impenetrable barrier, preventing Western influence from reaching the Nile. As long as aridity held, verb-initial syntax remained isolated. Injecting the Western SOV structure required a climate event significant enough to shatter that geographic barrier. That change arrived with the Holocene climate shift 10,000 years ago. The Ice Age ended, and intense monsoon rains began reaching the northern Sahara. These dots map human settlements securely clustered along the Nile right before the rains arrived. By 7,300 years ago, those communities had dispersed. The desert had transformed into a habitable savanna, allowing humans to move away from the Nile for the first time in millennia. Notice the dotted line across the map marking the Wadi Hawar, a massive tributary linking Chad to the Nile. Following this water, Afro-Asiatic-speaking hunter-gatherers migrated westward. From the opposite direction, Nilo-Saharan-speaking pastoralists moved east into the same valley. The physical geography of the Wadi Hawar acted as a terrestrial bottleneck. Two structurally distinct populations, carrying entirely different language families, were funneled into direct contact. The archaeological record confirms this was not a brief encounter. Analyses of human remains prove these two groups established semi-permanent settlements and intermixed over generations. Living side by side forced communication. Decades of shared habitation required speakers to navigate both languages simultaneously, triggering a process of sociolinguistic convergence. The Nilo-Saharan pastoralists were numerically dominant and eventually absorbed the Cushitic hunter-gatherers into their communities, but that absorption included their grammar. This localized climate anomaly created a prehistoric melting pot, and the surviving Nilo-Saharan speakers emerged with the structural rules of the people they absorbed. Evidence of this prehistoric contact remains visible in morphological remnants, specifically the use of converbs. A converb is a dependent verb expressing sequential or simultaneous events, always preceding the final main verb. Specialized suffixes mark whether the subject of the dependent verb is the same as the main verb or if the subject changes mid-sentence. This complex grammatical architecture perfectly mirrors across the two genetic language families, bridging the gap between Nilo-Saharan and Afroasiatic. A second structural mechanism acquired during this convergence confirms the link: singulative number marking. In English, we add a suffix to make a singular word plural. Singulative marking works in reverse, isolating one item from a natural group. For example, in Kordofan Nubian, koniol means eggs. To specify a single egg, the speaker appends the suffix to. This exact reverse plurality system is prevalent in Eastern Cushitic languages, but it is absent from the Omotic branch. This allows linguists to identify the exact group of hunter-gatherers present in the Wadi Hawar. The identical alignment of complex grammatical mechanisms across unrelated language families cannot be explained by chance. They function as a permanent structural record of the interactions that took place in the Wadi Hawar Valley. Roughly 3,000 years ago, the climate shifted. The monsoons failed, triggering permanent desertification across the region. The ecological collapse was total. The Wadi Hawar system, the corridor of human convergence, completely evaporated. This chart tracks the resulting diaspora. These vector arrows map the hybridized populations fleeing the dying savanna, forced eastward back toward the main Nile to survive. They took their hybridized Afro-Asiatic subject-object-verb syntax with them, locking the anomaly into the descendants of the Nilo-Saharan speakers. During the dynastic period, as Nile-Nubian speakers centralized power and conquered Egypt, their language underwent a secondary divergence. The pressures of state centralization smoothed out their grammar. Nile-Nubian eventually lost the singulative marking and complex vowel harmony that their cousins in Kordofan and Darfur maintain today. Despite heavy contact with the Egyptian state, the interaction only yielded superficial vocabulary borrowing. Their syntaxes, Verb-Initial versus subject-object-verb, were now too structurally opposed to merge. The Yellow Nile evaporated millennia ago, but the nature of the people, who collided on its banks, is recorded in the sentences of the people speaking today. Syntax is an archaeological site.